I'll just give a bit of an overview of the session before I kind of introduce myself fully. So we'll go into kind of exploring a bit about what equality, diversity, and inclusion means, why it matters, and specifically why it matters for you guys as attendees, for clubs, for delivery, for participation. Alistair's here from British Triathlon as well. Is going to be doing a bit around disability inclusion, which is fab. We'll have a bit of a break, and then we've got some really great speakers who are going to outline some great practice around engaging different communities, which is it's always so good to hear from other clubs and what other people are doing. And then we should have lots of time for a bit of an open discussion and chat towards the end. So yeah, my name is Jamie Hooper. I'm here from Inclusive Cultures. This was a business I set up earlier this year to support the sports sector around making improvements in equality, diversity, inclusion, specifically in sport and physical activity. Bits of triathlon are quite close to my heart. I guess all of them a little bit. I'm not very good at running unless I'm chasing something. But I worked for Swim England for 4 years, so swimming is a big part of my life. I actually managed to swim in a pool this morning, which was amazing. I'm sure lots of you others on the call have been out and active already over the last couple of days. So I led on equality, diversity and participation at Swim England. And then I was part of the Sport England equality and diversity team up until Christmas, when I moved away and set up my own business to be able to do more of this directly with the sector. And I'm super pleased to be here, to be involved. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a really good session. So I just wanted to set a little bit of context around the space, the virtual space that we're all in together at the moment. In that I really want people to feel comfortable that this is a safe, protected, comfortable environment for honest, open discussion. We know that this area is vast. We know that it's changing every day. We know that there's some big, meaty stuff in here that is reactive for everyone in certain ways. So I really want to try and ensure that we'll be creating as safe a space as possible. I certainly will be, and then Lizzie and Michelle are helping a lot behind the scenes in this, and we'll be looking at chat and things like that as well. So don't be worried about language, don't be worried about questions or saying the wrong thing. We're all here because we're either interested in this, we want to learn, or we want to get better. So let's look at it through that lens and not be worried about kind of how stuff comes out. So don't be worried about language. Please don't leave this session thinking, oh, I wish I asked that, or I could have asked a bit more around that. Please utilize the time that we've got, because we've got a lot of it tonight, which is fab, to be able to explore quite a lot in this space. And kind of, yeah, well done for being here. This is such a big area at the moment and is so important in terms of where the world is at and society as we're kind of emerging from COVID, which I'll come on to. But yeah, it's brilliant, and hopefully is a really good place for us all to be starting to move forwards together, to all be part of a movement around making the sport more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable, all of that really good stuff. And ultimately, this stuff only really works on a big level if we're all doing it together. The governing body can do loads. We'll come on to what some of the stuff that British Triathlon are doing, but they only have limited influence over the experiences that people are having every day at sessions when they're taking part. And that's the bit why this session is really important, that we're getting right down to that level. So yeah, this is all about creating that more inclusive, diverse environment for everyone to take part and have a great time when they do. And yeah, there has never been a more important time for us to be looking at this stuff now. So it's so exciting. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of equality, diversity, inclusion, and where I think we're at with that to try and shape some of the conversation for this session. there's a lot in here. We hear these words kind of bounded about quite a lot, and I'm sure they mean lots of different stuff to lots of different people. As a kind of general rule, and this might be interesting for people to come in on chat, whether they've got differing perspectives or they kind of want to add to this discussion. Lizzie and Michelle will give me a shout if stuff comes in that will be worth kind of contributing in to stop me speaking. So please feel like you can share and comment along and ask questions throughout. Equality for me is looking at a real focus on opportunity. So for me, I think we need to be looking at equality of opportunity and the level to which everybody has the same ability to be able to access the same things, the same chances as everybody else. If we try and keep the opportunity as a theme around how we work towards equality, I think it helps sometimes to get your head around a lot of this stuff. We'll come on to what some of this means in a more practical sense, but I just kind of wanted to outline stuff at a bit of a top level to start with. We often hear quite a lot in this space about creating a level playing field, and that sometimes equality is about making everything level. I have a personal issue with that, in that I don't think sport and physical activity is a level playing field or can ever be, really, because we know that at every single point there will be some people that need a little bit more support than others, or some people who need a little bit less support than others. It's a real, I guess similar to these backgrounds actually, a bit of a wavy line in terms of where everybody sits on that spectrum of opportunity and access to opportunity. So I try to think more of it as a bit of a undulating hillside as opposed to a flat level playing football pitch. Do come in on that if you think that's interesting, or you disagree, or you've got some points around that. That'll be interesting to hear. Diversity for me is about recognizing differences in people and then going further and celebrating them. So not just kind of noticing that somebody may be different, or somebody may need different support, or you may need to have some difference around the table, but by going further to actually action some of that, celebrate people's differences as opposed to jump into the negatives, which we sometimes, well, I think we often do in this kind of a space. So that for me, yeah, diversity is much more around recognizing people's differences, relating then obviously to equality and the kind of support around access to opportunities different people might need. Inclusion, the thread that brings that all together around offering everybody a great experience and ensuring that they're having a great time when they participate. Inclusion is a bit, I think, kind of brings everything together in this kind of a space. You can see on some of these, on this word cloud, and some of you who may be a bit more familiar with this area will have heard of things like the protected characteristics. So those are things that are specific to people's demographics. We tend to find quite a lot in this equality diversity space that we often jump straight to the Equality Act, and it gets quite legal and legislative and a bit scary and a bit overwhelming, but actually we should be bringing this right down to a participation point and just recognizing the people who are there and trying to support them. We'll come on to that in a more practical sense again a bit later, but those protected characteristics are things like your sex, whether you're male or female, your ethnicity, your faith, your age, your sexual orientation, those kinds of things that people may be familiar with. Those are really important points to know about potentially in terms of the people who are attending your sessions, to notice the trends in participation, which will then help you identify the gaps and where potentially you can make progress. Sally, who is going to speak later on from Windrush Tri Club, will talk a little bit more about data and will offer a really interesting experience around that and what the club is doing there. There's also other things to bear in mind around things like education, work status, living arrangements, lots of other things that we may not think about when we're kind of encouraging new members to join, and when people may be participating. There may be things linked to that that we might not have thought about in terms of people's income, in terms of how that might be. It might change at certain times of the year. It might be quite flexible. Things around maybe English not being someone's first language, whether someone can read or write, lots of these kind of things that we may not have front of mind, which you may not need to all the time, but by creating a space where people can talk about some of that stuff, or at least know that there may be support in place for some of those things, is a really good place to start. So I wanted to bring that right up to a bit more of a current flavor in terms of where some of this is at, and trying to make it more tangible in terms of where society is and where some of this stuff is happening on a daily basis, and some of the stuff that people will have seen and will have associated with and will have felt over the last year or so. We've all seen how coronavirus has hit different communities and different groups of people in very different ways, and has exacerbated some of the challenges that we already knew existed before coronavirus even came along. Specifically around access to opportunity is a massive one, in terms of how this virus has attacked certain demographics far more than others, whether that's older people, whether that's people from more diverse ethnicities. There's been a lot of talk recently about the percentages of vaccine take up and how a lot of that is related to people's ethnicity and their culture. A lot of that stuff will have a very real impact in terms of people participation moving forwards. There's lots of talk at government around these kind of vaccine passports and things like that, and that could potentially provide some real challenges for people, depending on where they're at with it. We've all been following the Black Lives Matter movement since the death of George Floyd, pretty much 12 months ago now. There was actually another shooting in the same place today whilst the trial was going on, of another young black guy who was stopped because he had like a scented tree in front of his rearview mirror, ended up being shot and killed. That's obviously it's hard to put into words how crazy it is seeing what's happening in America, but it's had a very real impact over here and across the world. And again, it's something that is a big part of where the sports sector is at the moment, in terms of reviewing how much work is being done around ethnic diversity, to what extent institutionalized racism exists in the sector, and how we're going to try and get over this as a sector. But we can bring that again right the way down to people's real life experiences at your clubs. I'm sure there may be some people who may be much more closely related to this movement, or will have had discussions around it, or have members of a non-white ethnicity who may be working through a lot of this stuff. And this is going to be ongoing for a long time. Similarly to that, but more recently, is the knock-on effect of what happened with Sarah Everard in Clapham. Again, Sally's going to touch on a little bit of that because they are very close to Clapham in London at Windrush. But how that then led to a much wider discussion about women's safety very quickly. And again, that will have real life impacts for your clubs, for your participants. You may be thinking about how you can make late night participation more inclusive. If you're out on rides or runs or swims early morning, late in the day, are there things that can be done to make those environments feel safer and be safer, and more welcoming for women, as well as the other side of this in terms of how things are being dealt with around sexual harassment, around safeguarding, around kind of behavioural standards. there's a real life impact to this stuff in terms of everyday participation. The other thing that's been pretty big over the last year or so is discussions around transgender inclusion. It's something that's quite big in sport. It's something that a lot of governing bodies are thinking about in terms of where they're at with policies and inclusion. Again, there may be people on the call who have trans members in their clubs. They may be, they might identify as being trans or gender fluid or non-binary. Again, this is a pretty new area for sport in terms of the practical aspects of some of this stuff. But I just really wanted to give a flavour of taking some of that bigger sciencey legal stuff around equality, diversity, and try and bring this into a bit more of a real life kind of perspective. I'll just pause there and see, Lizzie, has anything come through that's worth flagging at all?
Yes, we've had a comment from Louise Walker, who has, oh, it's just popped. So she's just popped in, oh, sorry. That there's a recent report saying that there's no institutional racism in the UK. So that's had a massive impact on people's confidence. And then we've also just had another comment in from Paul saying that he's concerned with how the media portrays issues and that it often appears that the media agenda is driven and not necessarily for the benefit of society. And then social media spreads the news.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things jump to mind with that in terms of the big stuff that's come out around like the Harry and Meghan interview with Oprah. I didn't expect to be talking about this on a triathlon call, but it's relevant because we can see very clearly how the media would treat someone like Kate Middleton differently to Meghan Markle and what those experiences have been like. You can see these things in the media. I'm pleased someone mentioned about the government race report because that's been hugely triggering for people that I've been working with over the last week or so around this government report that's come out that basically says that racism doesn't exist in this country, which is just ludicrous. But we can see how from very early on that was a narrative that the government wanted to push out. They wanted to make progress. And you can see how easy it is sometimes for the government media to be pushing a lot of this stuff out when actually it might not be what's happening on the ground. So it's useful to have some of this stuff in mind where, you know, you might have participants coming along, workforce, other people in the spaces that you're working in that might be going through some stuff with some of this that's worth bearing in mind when people are coming along, are maybe a bit quiet, a bit more subdued, just thinking about whether there's anything you can do or just to ask if people are okay and offer some support around some of this stuff. That's brilliant. Really good comments there.
Also got another comment there as well. It just says, it's just from Brian, says, I'm finding that the cost of the sport may hinder someone from participation, i.e. an income barrier. He says, at least here in South Florida. Gosh, that's a long way to join us from. Price of events and the use of bicycle. I've been out of the UK for a few years. How are swim to run events viewed?
Yeah, cost is massive. We know it is for sport, especially in a sport that potentially needs, well, 3 separate bits of kit sometimes. We know that's going to be an issue, and we know that's something that is a constant part of what governing bodies are looking at all the time. So whether there's ways that you can look to recycle equipment as much as you can, or there's ways that you can be flexible with membership fee programs, or whether you can offer people subsidies if they can give a bit of volunteer time back. There's loads of stuff that you can do to be flexible around things like money. Again, it tends to be one of those like typical British things where we just don't talk about money. It's not something that's very approachable or easy to kind of talk about. But if you can create that environment where if somebody is struggling 1 month and they just need a bit of support, if they know that that's an okay thing to be coming to the club with to say, it just takes so much like animosity and anxiety out of some of that stuff. If people are coming to join and they can already see that the club promotes kind of recycling kit or sharing stuff or flexible payment programs, all those kind of things, will be really attractive, particularly for audiences who may not be taking part at the moment. A really good point. I slightly feel on a bit of a downer now. I know there's someone here in Florida. I can't complain. I've just moved from London to rural Cumbria, so I've got it pretty good, but maybe not as good as Florida. So bringing this into a kind of a sport-specific space, Sport England have just released their new 10-year strategy. It's the first time they've had a strategy longer than 4 years. And this matters for the sector because we know that it will ultimately have a knock-on effect to where different partners in the sector are at. The title of the strategy you can see is Uniting the Movement, and we know that the big headline kind of thing to target within this strategy is around tackling inequalities. So we know there's going to be a big focus in this space from the top of the sector around trying to address the inequalities in the sport, and that will ultimately have a knock-on effect to governing bodies, to local authorities, to a huge range of different partners. We also know that there is a new version of the equality standards for sport that are coming out, and there is a new updated version of the governance code for sport. This is quite strategic stuff in the sector, but it's maybe useful for people to know if they have an interest in some of this stuff. So the governance code will hold anybody receiving funding from Sport England account to having levels of diversity on their board. So at the moment, there is a target around gender diversity. We think there is also going to be targets coming in around disability and ethnic diversity, which will be really good to see to try and to push things forward again after the progress that's been seen around the gender side of things. And the equality standards for sport are kind of work alongside the governance code to, it's much more focused on supporting partners to embed a lot of this stuff in terms of a day-to-day practice. Now, I wanted to mention it because it's relevant in this space, and if people are interested in it, there may be some stuff when that comes out that you'll be interested in picking up, potentially replicating at a club level. There could be some really interesting stuff in there. This will obviously, I kind of mentioned the governance side of things, but this will be relevant massively to the workforce across the sector and in terms of clubs. So people who are, I'm talking about workforce from paid coaches right the way down to everyday volunteers, in terms of, again, trying to replicate some of this stuff, not only at a top level, but throughout the club. Again, I'll come back to that, kind of breaking that down a little bit more. But I just wanted to mention and give a bit of an update around where I know British Triathlon are at. Do you know if Mark is on here at all?
I haven't seen him pop in.
Cool. So Mark is the person at British Triathlon who's leading a lot of this work, but he's given me permission to give you guys a little bit of a headline in terms of where things are at. So British Triathlon now have an equality, diversity, inclusion group in place. That is an internal group that is across all of the home councils, and they are developing a new EDI action plan across the home nations to tackle this area of work. It includes the 5 key themes that you can see around this point about creating great experiences. So I've mentioned governance, people, culture, communication, education, all really important points that will really help the sport make some progress in this space. So I think the action plan that's been developed has now gone to all of the home nation boards for approval. That will then go public, and that will be underpinned by specific action plans for each of the home nations. So that will be brilliant to see, coupled with those home nations, each of their own EDI working groups. So this puts triathlon ahead of quite a lot of other sports in terms of where they're at with this. Not only have they got an internal group in place, but they're developing an action plan. There's a bit of strategy behind it. I'm sure some of this will be reflected in British Triathlon's wider strategy, which should be coming later in the year. And we'll hopefully see that across the other home nations as well. So yeah, really great progress. And if people are interested in getting involved with that, please let the governing body know. I think there will be opportunities for people to feed in as part of these wider working groups that will be developed a bit later. But yeah, I definitely wanted to take the chance to give you an update in terms of where your governing body is at. I'll pause there again to see if is there anything else that's come in.
Yeah, we've just had a comment come in saying, thinking about inclusivity in triathlon, clubs are generally volunteer driven and run. Unless somebody with an interest in inclusivity is an added layer of admin and support to provide. Commercial events and companies may be the same scenario and they have to see a return on investment. I'm not sure if that might relate a little bit later to one of our guest speakers, or if you want to pick that up now.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll have an example later of somebody who has a passion around this stuff and is doing it within the club. It's that interesting balance, isn't it, of whether you have somebody specific to try and pick up making progress in some of this space, or whether it becomes part of the fabric of the club, of the committee, of everyone's kind of business, everybody's responsibility. Well, we will talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, I totally take that point around it's tough running a club. We know that it runs on volunteers and it's hard and everyone is busy, particularly at the moment with trying to make everything COVID safe and all the challenges that have come with that. But a lot of this, which I will come back to, boils down to what clubs feel like is their responsibility. What are they trying to achieve, and what is their responsibility to their members, but also kind of the local community. We'll come back to that shortly. I've just seen some more flags. Is there anything else?
Yes, well, the comment that's just come through is about saying that it's the great thing to see is people participating for a charity, and the media coverage can promote a good feeling and want to be involved. Good PR is a great driver, but not all clubs appear to be successful or active with it.
Yeah, PR is a tough one, and trying to use social media and contacts in the right way. Again, yeah, that might be something we can come on to when we get into the discussions. But I wanted to just try and I was going to show a couple of videos to just try and bring some of this stuff to home a little bit, because you've had enough of me kind of talking at you for a little while. I'm just going to load this. So this is a video that will hopefully kind of bring home some of the social context side of some of this stuff.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder. Take off your backpack. Basketball, line up. We're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. A $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go. If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
I'll just pause that there. It's obviously a very American kind of style video, but I think there's a lot in that that is relevant to what we're trying to talk about here, and can be quite overwhelming in terms of how big some of this stuff can be, and what we're trying to get at. But this is about bringing things down to a practical experience level, that where you are offering people the opportunity to take part, and genuinely trying to work to ensure that everybody has the ability to take part and feel like they're having a good time when they're doing so. This is about looking for new members in places that you may not have looked before, and never knowing what kind of talent you might find in that space, whether that's talent across taking part in the sport, or whether that's talent in terms of being a coach or a volunteer or a committee member. There's so much stuff in that around looking in places that you may not have looked before. This is about asking yourself how representative your club is of the local area where you may take part, and ensuring that your club committees and kind of the decision makers within that space have the ability to make genuine informed decisions about encouraging different people to be able to take part. So if you know that your club committee is made up of completely kind of white, privileged, middle-aged, privately educated people, it may be worth thinking about trying to get some different people in that space to just offer a different perspective sometimes. I know that's hard because of people trying to give up time and encouraging more volunteers, but this is a big responsibility at the moment to try and make progress in this space. This is about, as I mentioned before playing that video, about assessing, addressing what you feel like your club's responsibility is to the local community, or to the places where you take part and do what you guys do. This is about making a little bit of effort to try and do the right thing, about pushing ourselves further than just kind of doing what we do. And ultimately is about securing a legacy and sustainability of the sport that we all love. We're all here because we want to take part and we love doing so. And this is about making sure that that can continue, but also that other people have the ability to do that as well. So I hope that's kind of relevant and is hitting home a little bit. I saw a couple of flashes. Was there any points in there that's worth?
Just everyone was saying that the video was really great.
Great. I think Michelle's able to share the link to the video, and I'm going to share a couple of others. It's one that's kind of, that one has done the rounds a little bit in terms of looking at the social impact stuff on this. But yeah, I think really hits home around the genuine kind of impact of a lot of this stuff, and what we're trying to work with. I'm going to play 2 more videos around specifically on kind of 2 points in this space, and 2 points of terminology really about this area. So one of them is about privilege, and one of them is about intersectionality. So they may be 2 things that you've picked up maybe across the last year in terms of a lot of the stuff that I mentioned earlier on. So we're going to pick up privilege first, and looking at kind of what that means, and what we can do about it. So I'll just play this video for you.
Been engaged in a global conversation about race and racism. You've probably had discussions at home, at school, or at work, and in those conversations, you've probably heard the term white privilege. You may have even had this term used in a way that felt like an insult or an accusation. Others will have told you that it's all just made up to make white people feel bad, and none of this is right. Privilege is a hard concept for people to understand, because normally when we talk of privilege, we imagine immediate unearned riches and tangible benefits for anyone who has it. But white privilege, and indeed all privilege, is actually more about the absence of inconvenience, the absence of an impediment or challenge. And as such, when you have it, you really don't notice it. But when it's absent, it affects everything we do. There are lots of types of privilege out there. The privilege of being born into a wealthy family versus a poor family is kind of obvious. But then there's the privilege of being able-bodied versus having or acquiring a disability that most of us take for granted. I have 2 very close friends who are wheelchair users, and I'll be honest, when I first met them, I was completely ignorant about the everyday ways their lives are made harder through no fault of their own. Some of these ways are simply thoughtless, but some of them are just the way we live, just the way we build infrastructure, just the way everything works. That just makes their life harder than mine. That's just one of the ways that I'm privileged. And understanding that, embracing that, doesn't make me a bad person. But ignoring it raises the chance that my friends will be excluded in ways that are not obvious to me. And as that friend, I can't allow that. There's a good chance as a white person watching this, your life is already hard. Every day you have to overcome some difficulty or challenge just to get by, but you can still have white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or you don't deserve the success you've had. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard or that you've never suffered. It simply means that your skin color has not. There is nothing but a benefit to understanding our own privileges, white and otherwise. It brings us closer to those who are different. It helps us be vigilant about the ways we treat others different than us. It helps us make a society that is fairer and more equal. Having white privilege doesn't make your life easy, but understanding it can help you realize why some people's lives are harder than they should. Been engaged in a global.
So that's John Amici talking, who's a former NBA basketball player, who was the first to come out as LGBT, but has spoken a lot recently around race and privilege, kind of building on the Black Lives Matter movement. A couple of his videos have gone a bit viral, so you might have seen some of them, but I really wanted to make sure that was included, because there is a lot of talk about privilege at the moment, and it's a really triggering word for people, and can make people panic and feel kind of targeted, and can really make people feel uncomfortable, which is absolutely not what it's about. This is about taking the opportunity to just appreciate what advantages you may have had, what privileges you may have had, similar to the race video we just saw, over and above those that others might have had in their lives. And even better, if we can go one step further to try and bring that gap closer together, that's brilliant. So I wanted to include something on privilege, because there's a lot of talk about it in this space at the moment. but yeah, this is much more about recognizing your advantages as well as the disadvantages of others, and ideally trying to work to close that gap a little bit. Is there anything on that one before I play the next one?
Yeah, we've just had a comment in from Audrey to say that it's also key to change the mindset of some of the members, as it's not surprising that some are completely oblivious to what's happening within their immediate club or community.
Yeah, a really interesting point. And that's, I think, what we see quite a lot of the time is people saying, I don't know, like, that's not relevant for me. I'm not kind of in that space. I'm not racist. I've got a black friend. Those kind of things in this space that make people they're quite reactive, and they're almost kind of pushing people away to say, like, don't target me, don't come at me, like I'm a good person. But actually, this is not about accusing people or not of where they're at with some of this stuff. This is about encouraging people to just recognize that they might have had access to opportunities a lot easier than some other people. This is not about targeting people to say, you're white privileged, so you must be racist, and along those kinds of lines. That's absolutely not what we're trying to get here. Was that another one?
We've just had another one come through from Louise to say that as a woman of colour, it is difficult to discuss the advantages that some may have using the term white privilege. It can be misunderstood, as you have said. Brilliant.
Thanks, Louise. That's I'm really pleased you shared that. And it's great for me to hear from a person of colour as well that you're agreeing with what I'm saying. That's fab. So then, yeah, the next point I wanted to make was around intersectionality. So this will kind of become clear what we're getting at here, but this again is a really modern term around this kind of equality, diversity, inclusion space.
What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a way of understanding social relations by examining intersecting forms of discrimination. This means acknowledging that social systems are complicated and that many forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, and ageism, might be present and active at the same time in a person's life. Everyday approaches to building equality tend to focus on one type of discrimination, for instance, sexism, and then work to address only that specific concern. But while the career of a young, white, and able-bodied woman might improve with gender equality protections, an older, Black, disabled lesbian may continue to be hampered by racism, ageism, ableism, and homophobia in the workplace. Intersectionality is about understanding and addressing all potential roadblocks to an individual or group's well-being. But it's not as simple as just adding up oppressions and addressing each one individually. Racism, sexism, and ableism exist on their own, but when combined, they compound and transform the experience of oppression. Intersectionality acknowledges that unique oppressions exist, but is also dedicated to understanding how they change in combination. The roots of intersectionality lie within the Black feminist movement, with legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw originating the term. Crenshaw felt that anti-racist and feminist movements were both overlooking the unique challenges faced by Black women. She stated that legislation about race is framed to protect Black men, and legislation about sexism is understood to protect white women. So simply combining racism and sexism together does not therefore protect Black women. Intersectional theory is now applied across a range of social divisions and also to understandings of domination, such as those associated with whiteness, masculinity, and heterosexuality. Intersectionality is not only about multiple identities, and it's not a simple answer to solving problems around equality and diversity. It is, however, an essential framework as we truly engage with issues around privilege and power and work to bring them into the open. Intersectionality means listening to others, examining our own privileges, and asking questions about who may be excluded or adversely affected by our work. As importantly, it means taking measurable action to invite, include, and centre the voices and work of marginalised individuals.
So yeah, that is a little bit of a sciencey way to say treat people, as individuals. Intersectionality is about recognizing the person in front of you and the many different kinds of advantages, disadvantages they may have experienced, and the support that that person may or may not need. So intersectionality is a much more modern approach to equality, diversity, inclusion, around recognizing people as individuals and supporting them in the best way possible at that time. So it simply means about taking people as a kind of as they are, I guess, but recognizing their individual demographics, perspectives, and trying to then translate that into the support that they need to have a really good experience. So this is about taking a more holistic, encompassing approach to offering a really good experience to everyone. And I guess a little bit trying to move away from specific participation programs for specific groups, although that is definitely still needed in some areas, and we're going to hear a really good example of that later on. But this is about starting to think about addressing this as a whole kind of culture, as in creating the best inclusive experience for everyone, which I hope is going to lead us quite nicely into the next bit with Alistair. But I'll just pause there and see if anything else has come in at all.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, fab. Well, that's kind of the end of me, I guess, speaking at you, but I'll be kind of facilitating some of the bits a bit later on. But please, as we're kind of working through things, be jotting down questions. We've got space at the end for some open discussion. So I'm really keen to try and get into a bit more of this about kind of what people think, whether they think I'm totally bonkers, whether they've got a different experience. That'll be really brilliant. So yeah, please have a think about stuff that we might be able to come back to and explore a bit more. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Alistair Dalton, who's para-tri lead at British Triathlon. He's going to talk a little bit about, oh no, not that one, about disability inclusion and kind of what that practically means, and some of the things that you guys can bear in mind. Alistair, I can see you there and off mute. Are you there? All right.
Yeah.
Over to you.
I'm good to go. So first of all, good evening, everybody. Nice to virtually meet you, particularly those I've not met before, and say hello again to any I have. I think the key bit as a starting point here, and I think this is I definitely wouldn't see myself as an expert in this area, and I think that's key, because I don't think it's about being an expert. As Jamie said, I work in the performance department, actually, at British Triathlon as the pathway manager for the Paralympic programme, and have done for a number of years. I'm also now part of the equality and diversity group at British Triathlon, and actually I sit in a similar group with Scottish Athletics outside of that as an external advisor to that group. Really what I'm here today to talk about is just talking about how you would support someone either as a coach or within a club when they come into your environment and they are disabled, and they're not someone who you are used to working with, or something that is different and that you would see as different. So I want to talk a little bit about what allowances you might make, how someone may like to be treated. Again, I think one of the key bits, and to talk about what Jamie's talked about already, is, getting worried about language can really hold some people back, and likewise, a fear of making mistakes can hold someone back. But when you're coaching anyone, if you're going to try and develop as a coach, you're going to make mistakes, and that's something that's really key to just acknowledge and sort of crack on. And there's mistakes and there's mistakes, obviously, but you can, as long as you use common sense, that's really, really important. And it's just about how you can really create that inclusive culture and treat everyone equally. So can we have the next slide, please? So I've got a couple of scenarios. I don't know if this will work or not. If you could use the chat box that you've got there for the first one. So I'm going to give a real example. I coach triathlon. I, be pretty honest, don't know an awful lot about swimming. So what route should I take as a triathlon coach that is not an expert in swimming? If anyone's brave enough to throw an answer in the chat box. Anyone brave? Not at the moment. Okay, I will just carry on just in case. I suppose the point I'm getting to here is, speak to someone else who has more experience. Thank you, Louise. Exactly. And again, same from Mike. A really key part of it is, genuinely, when I coach triathlon, I'm not an expert on swimming. Talk to me about running and I'll talk to you about it all day long. Talk to me about cycling and I'm pretty happy and going with it. Talk to me about swimming and it's not my strength. I develop my knowledge over time, but I do that by working with other people. I do it as well by working with athletes that I coach. Particularly in the world of triathlon, where you have people coming from so many backgrounds often, they may well know more than I do, and a really key way of finding out is just speaking to them, because they are the athlete and they're the person you're trying to help. So when I'm talking, if I go into the situation and I'm a triathlon coach and an athlete with an impairment I'm not familiar with joins my club or group, I suppose I would ask the same question, and if anyone has any answers differently to what I should do. Again, thank you for jumping in and helping me and not leaving it dead. So yeah, you may not be good at it. Ask advice for a mentor, reflect, review the athletes and your peers. Don't pretend you do no harm. Talk to the athlete about what they need. Exactly. It's the same thing. There is no difference. What might be more of a challenge is finding someone who feels that they have the confidence and the knowledge and the background to talk to you about it, but it's the same principle. I feel, that the technicalities might be different. There might be some things that are a little bit different, but in reality, the only way you're going to be able to find out is by speaking to the athlete and by speaking to people who know and who have experience. And that's something that's really key. And obviously the beauty of triathlon is you have 3 different disciplines, and therefore you have people who may well be experts from another field. And actually, it can be an awful lot more engaging. It can be something different. It can be more exciting. One of our strength and conditioning coaches on the Olympic program has worked in our Olympic program for a good 10 years now. As a result of that, he has worked with some of the very, very best triathletes, and you'd probably argue the world has ever seen. But actually, what he finds really enjoyable as sessions is if he comes down to Loughborough, where we have our Paralympic squad are based, and works with the athletes and has to work things out and do things differently, he gets excited because he's actually challenging himself to look at things in a different way. It's not just calf raises that are the same, or this particular exercise, because if somebody doesn't have a leg or doesn't have an arm or a hand, you have to adapt and you have to change. And that's something that just makes things more exciting and more, just more of a challenge. And often a lot of people hopefully like to coach because they enjoy challenge. So that's something that is really important to look at. If we could flick on again, please. Next slide. There we go. So on this slide, there's just a few things that have been put up. I asked the athletes that we currently have in our pathway squad on the Paralympic side, obviously, what they thought about how they should be supported if they're going into a new environment or a club environment. And the athletes I'm talking about all have a variety of backgrounds. One of them actually grew up in canoeing, one of them grew up as a swimmer, one as an athlete, some of them outside of sport until they sort of came to us. So they've all had a load of different experiences, and the stuff you see before is just some of what I've mentioned already, but this was what the athlete said and this is what they feel. So listen to the athlete. Also really key, don't be afraid to push the athlete, even if they don't think they can do something. That doesn't mean you bully them and push them far too far on, but this is something that is, people want to be there to do sport. If somebody's turned up to do sport, they want to go there and do sport, and they want to feel they're treated the same as everyone else. coach the athlete, not the disability. It's the person inside that really counts. They'll tell you if they're struggling, and you don't need to second guess things. So if somebody really cannot do it or is really uncomfortable with doing it, they'll talk to you about it. Or you'll be able to see that when you're working with them rather than just assuming they can't. And again, if you've got specific questions, come and ask us at British Triathlon, or come and ask local clubs. There are loads of clubs around that do have specialities. For example, there is a London wheelchair triathlon club. If you happen to be based somewhere around the Midlands, in Coventry, there's a really big, strong wheelchair athletics group. The coach there will always help anyone out who goes and asks for questions and things. There's quite a lot of, there are like VI clubs and so on with visually impaired athletes. So there's an awful lot of people out there who will be out there to help. And there's an awful lot of people who would be really keen to help you. Next slide, please. Let me just check what came in the chat. So I'm going to give you a little case study of two athletes I've been fortunate enough to coach, just to try and sort of highlight the difference that you can have sometimes when you're working there. On the left is a lad called Andy. He's a runner. He's non-disabled, and he competed primarily in 800 meters. And I coached him as a runner. On the right is George Peasgood. George is one of the para triathletes in our squad. He's been doing the sport for 10 years, and he is a real true triathlete, as in he's grown up through the sport. He grew up having had a really serious accident when he was just a few years old, which basically meant that his left leg, his ankle is fused, or very nearly fused, at a sort of 40-degree angle. His foot on that side is only size 7, whereas his foot on his right is size 12. And actually his left leg, although it's the impaired one, ended up after some operations significantly longer than the right one did. So he has a fair degree of challenge. When I started working with Andy, he's a very bright, intelligent guy. He works as a doctor now, and he was competing to a really good level and continued to compete to a really good level. But actually, it was really difficult for him to run more than 3 times a week. For whatever reason, various parts of his body just made it a real challenge. But he couldn't see that there was a challenge, and he really, really struggled with that factor. To be honest, he probably could have competed fairly well in triathlon because he did so much cross training, but he really hated cross training, and he never really bought into it because he wanted to be a runner. And he couldn't see what his challenge was. With George, he knew that there was a challenge. The first time that George did a 5K at the end of a British Champs, when he was only about 16, he ran about 32 minutes. So he knew that there was a challenge. However, he came to our training centre at the age of about 17. At that stage, he was cycling pretty well, swimming pretty well, but his running was way off in terms of world standard. But he knew that there was a challenge, and he bought into what we suggested. We were very fortunate to have use of an Ultra-G treadmill. And for about 3 years, George did 3 run sessions a week, and 2 of them were on the Ultra-G and 1 was out on the roads. And that has built him up over a number of years to the fact that now George does a pretty substantial volume. He doesn't use the Ultra-G, but because he saw the impairment that he had, and he understood that, and we as a coaching staff did that, we were able to create a long-term plan that he was able to buy into. So in reality, when it came to George, almost because of the visibility of his impairment and knowing it, it was actually far easier to coach him than it was to coach Andy, although there was some elements that were similar in terms of their struggles. George, incidentally, has now run a flat 5K in about 16:20. So you can see the progress that's been made, but that's taken an awful long time and a much, much longer period. And sometimes it can be easier and there are less challenges because of that. Not every time, but sometimes there will be. And the real key to that is coach the person in front of you, work with the person that's there. It's exactly what Jamie was talking about in the last video, but it's that part of how do you work with people, and how do you communicate effectively with them, and how do you get your message across really effectively with them. So if I can have the last of my slides, please. This is just, I'm presuming these slides will be shared afterwards. Could I just get a thumbs up, or if we could paste this into or I could paste it into the chat box?
I'll paste it into the chat box, Alistair.
Brilliant, perfect, thank you. This is just some examples. Now, we spoke before, there was talk about the cost of triathlon. Generally, if you are a disabled participant in triathlon, that cost goes up an awful lot. The stats that come out from the are that on average, it costs £585 a month more to live as a disabled youngster than it does a non-disabled youngster. And then on top of that, you look at the costs of kit. So you can't go to Halfords and get a bike for 250 quid if you need a hand bike or you need a tandem. You're talking about thousands of pounds. You haven't got someone else down the club who can lend you one necessarily, unless you are very lucky. So one of the real barriers is the cost element, to allow people to get in and experiment and find out about the sport and enjoy the sport from the very beginning, and find out if they enjoy it and if they like it and if they want to engage in it. Likewise, you know, there are lots of ways you can get through things. So a race chair tends to be a bespoke piece of kit fitted to someone, but actually you can get what you call a freewheel that fits to the front of your race chair, or sorry, to your day chair, and allows you to start pushing it more like a race chair. It's not as fast, it's not the finished article, but it allows you to start experiencing the sport. There are local funding streams, again, from a British Triathlon perspective, and you can speak to your region managers who may have a bit more knowledge and different clubs and stuff in the area. But it's really key that you do what you can to allow people to engage in the sport from the beginning. You know, if you had a non-disabled athlete turn up at your club, you wouldn't ask them to go out and spend the money to get a TT bike with carbon wheels and all this that, you know, costs you 5, 10, whatever grand that you want it to. But that's almost how it can feel sometimes as a disabled participant, when you've got to purchase a tandem or purchase a race chair or a running prosthetic or whatever it may be. So the websites I noted here, and these are just a few. Charlotte's Tandems is an organisation which helps to lend tandems out to people for them to be able to get involved in sport, and is a nationwide body. Wheels for All likewise looks at bikes for a number of different people, and so all sorts of different bikes. The reason I put up Snug Wetsuits, they don't provide suits as such, but they're very good at doing, people may use them already. Snug Wetsuits do like tailoring wetsuits. So actually, if you have someone who has different size of limbs, or is missing limbs, or anything like that, again, a wheelchair athlete tends to be far bigger upper body and far smaller lower body, you know, than a non-disabled athlete. So all sorts of different options you can have. The other one, the Disability Cycling Hubs, is actually a British cycling program. They have a number of different hubs across the country which have various different types of bikes for disabled participants to try out the sport and get involved in. So you can try them out if you want, and that's a good place that you can send people to, and just to get them started. That's it for me. As I say, much of this, it's about trying to remove boundaries, and about trying to create a playing field that allows disabled participants to come in and get involved in the sport and enjoy the sport for what it is, regardless of sort of what their ambitions are. So if we have any, I can see there's all the links and stuff have gone in there, so thank you very much. If we have any questions, we've got time for any questions now.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Alistair, thank you, and follows on really nicely from a lot of what we talked about. Yeah, I was just going to say, we've probably got 5 minutes or so if anybody wants to jump in and pull on Alistair's knowledge, you've got some time to chat with a guru about any questions you might have at the moment.
We've had a couple of comments. So we had one from Alison around, she said that people won't always tell you if they're struggling within a group club session. They're more likely to not turn up next time. So I don't know if there's any points around that. And then also Paul's just put in a message to say, for me, seeing the Paralympics or the Invictus Games has been a huge driver. Seeing success spurs others on. There appear to be a few inclusive events in developing. It may just be to reduce the competitive aspect from people. I don't know if there's any discussion points around there.
Okay, so I'll pick up on the I'll pick up on the first one of those around people talking. So those points I picked, we particularly asked the group of athletes who we work with. So that was their comment rather than necessarily a comment I'd come with myself. Again, I think that comes down to relationships and that comes down to coaching. So if you develop a coaching relationship with someone, then that's when they become more likely. So yes, it's a case of, as with any new club member, finding out about the athlete when they first come, asking them questions. If you have someone who turned up who's never done any exercise before, you're not going to send them out for a 10-mile run. It's the same process, and it's just getting to know people and then learning what their, I suppose, body language they might give across when they're not that comfortable with something that would be really helpful. So yeah, it's not an answer. I'm not sort of waving the flag that is the case, but that's, I do take your point that if first time up you get someone and they can't do it, they may just not show up again. So again, that's just trying to get there. Really quickly, the adapted part for the regular wheelchair is called I've gone and forgotten its name, a freewheel. It's a freewheel, which just basically attaches to the front of the chair, and instead of two casters, you then have a single wheel at the front. They're quite good for off-roading, for sort of general use, but they also allow you that more stable position to work on. I'm just going through the comments because there's a few. The one about the Paralympics and stuff, the interesting part in that is actually that part of where the disconnect is in terms of the Paralympics as such hasn't necessarily increased participation in disabled sport as a whole. Because often, and again, this is part of the struggle we have, if you see our top level wheelchair athletes, for example, competing, and you see their carbon bike, hand bike, it's a phenomenal piece of kit, and it's a very, very expensive piece of kit. You see the race chair again, it literally fits around their body like a sock. That seems quite disconnected from someone who's trying to get into activity and sport at the beginning. One of the things we are trying to do currently at British Triathlon is make sure we do a better job of highlighting which events we have that are really open to everyone and that will be suitable for everyone, that will allow people to make their own minds up about how they get involved in the sport. So as an example, actually, a lot of the Go Try events are really accessible to an awful lot of people and are a really great product for that. But we're trying to do that job across the piece and make sure that people do sort of see what is accessible to them and where they can get involved. Will, thank you. That's a great job. Just in terms of challenged athletes, we don't have a connection with them as such. They do, I believe, directly support the American Challenged Athlete Foundation is an American body. I think they do support the American Paratriathlon team, but they do also provide grant aid for a number of athletes getting involved in the sport across the world. So they are a really good resource in that way. I think, Mike, to sort of answer your point, was basically what I was just talking about. I hadn't read your question yet at that point, but in terms of how we support around the club level, again, you know, we have a number of paratriathlon events every year. They're branded as a super series, and I'm very aware that probably puts people off. So one of the other jobs we're trying to do at the moment is on our website, if I'm really honest, there's probably slightly mixed messaging. when people come on and it asks about getting involved in the sport, if you are a disabled participant, we want to create a far better journey that allows you to go down the pathway route, or that allows you to go down the route into participation and enjoy like the fantastic sport the triathlon is for what it is. And some of that will be developing resources on our on the website that share some of the sort of links that I've shared with you there today, and share some different ways that that people can get involved. That will be a resource for athletes, for coaches, for clubs, and also, you know, for my colleagues throughout British Triathlon, who I know do their best to try and support like any athlete, no matter who they are, when they come in. So I feel I've talked for quite a long time there. So has anyone got any other questions before I think we move to breaks? I will pass to Jamie.
Yeah, that's brilliant and bang on time. Couldn't be more perfect. I've just seen one more little flash. Is that a quick question that's come in?
It says, being inclusive at a club level may be difficult, as limited coaching numbers or sessions available can make it difficult for a coach to apply the good practice we understand.
Yeah, that's. I was going to jump in there, Alistair, in terms of a wider point about something we've already talked about in terms of this integration versus separation in terms of participation. In that you may not always need separate sessions for some people, potentially even disabled people, in that I think the more that we can try and push ourselves to be as integrated as possible is a good way to be. Alistair, you might totally come back and disagree with that now.
No, to be honest, one example in particular, and then there's lots of different impairments, and lots of different people who have lots of different impairments. So there will always be individual cases, just as there is with non-disabled people. But for example, if you have visually impaired athletes, by and large, they cannot go out and run, or they cannot go out and ride a bike on their own. It's not safe to do so. If they do have a tandem though, it can actually be, and we have got examples of this. So Alison Peasgood, who is our current Paralympic silver medalist, very much came through the club level of the sport. She'd been involved in running at an OK level, and she got involved very much as a club participant before building through. And within her local triathlon club, it was basically each Sunday on the club long ride, a different athlete was her guide or her pilot, whichever you wish to call it, and just got on the front of the tandem. And actually they found it a fantastic way of, you know, having a little bit of different challenge, helping out one of their teammates. And it just really integrated her to become a real part of the club. And actually the real advantage for her was she wasn't then dependent on one person, because actually some visually impaired athletes do really struggle with having to become dependent on someone and feeling like they are. So that's one example of how athletes can be really integrated into sessions. She grew up, as I say, as a runner, and within her running club, again, the coach would just say, all right, such and such, can you run with Alison today? Such and such, can you run with Alison? And you had, again, it really helps to sort of develop what the athletes, you know, the other athletes, it helps to develop their understanding of life. To speak back to the first video you showed, all about privilege, and I'll be honest, I find that a really, really emotive video, and I'm glad I didn't have to speak after it and I had my camera off. But it actually gets people to start thinking a little bit outside of their own comfortable box, and outside of their own world. So there are really ways of doing it. We have an example of, I think probably about 2 years ago now, an athlete who was on the British Triathlon's age group team who suffered a really bad spinal cord injury, is back, you know, training with her club, but she's now using a hand bike to do it. And she's going out on club rides, and she's just maybe rides with a different group to who she did before. There are loads and loads of examples of how people can be integrated. And most people, if you look at the research, and I say this after citing research because again, I'm definitely not the expert. A lot of people getting involved in sport, whether they are disabled or they're not, do so for comradeship, for friendship. You know, that's the reason for getting involved, not to be in something separate. So if you can find a way that people are integrated and doing it together, you're far more likely encourage more people who have different challenges to the majority of people to get involved with your club.
Brilliant. Yeah, amazing. I'm pleased we're aligned on that. That's good. I wasn't just talking rubbish. I mean, there's always going to be examples both ways, but I think that point around asking people what they can do, what they want to do, not making assumptions about just putting someone over here in a space because that's what you think is going to be best. Let's just have a conversation about how you can best support someone to take part, no matter what kind of context you're talking about that in. Brilliant. I think what we'll do is pause there to have a bit of a break for 10 minutes up until 8 o'clock. So we've got time to do whatever we need to do. I've got a little puppy who's just woken up who I need to give some dinner to. So this is perfect timing. So yeah, I think if we come back at 8, we'll then hear from some really good examples from a couple of other clubs, and then have some time for a bit more open discussion. Fab. Thank you. Lizzie, I can see you're back. Was there anything else come in at all that was worth picking up?
Not during the break, no.
Fab. And has Louise joined yet? Do you know?
Let me just check.
Yeah, Lou's on.
Fab.
She was asking some of the questions as well.
Oh, brilliant. Fab. I didn't want to make assumptions with Louise's. Oh. Seeing I've just been spotlighted, does that change anything? I think it's all working all right still, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just me making sure like the right people are on the screen at the right time.
Okay. Cool. Just give it one more minute. Okay, perfect. Let's I think I'll make that about 8. Let's jump back in. Hopefully our speakers are back as well. So we're going to hear from, as I mentioned, a couple of different clubs around some of the great work they've done in this space. So we're going to hear from Windrush, as I've already mentioned, who are based down in Brixton in London. And we're going to hear from Leeds Girls Can Try. I don't know why I said that so slowly, but I went for emphasis, so hopefully that came across. I think I was just trying to make sure I said it right. So yeah, we're going to hear a little bit about what both clubs have been doing across different kinds of areas of diversity and inclusion. We'll have some time to have a chat through those bits, ask any questions, a bit of a Q&A, and then we'll have a bit more of a wider discussion session. So what I'm hoping to do is hand over to Sally, who is a diversity captain at Windrush, who is going to give us a brilliant overview about some of the stuff the club's been doing.
Brilliant, thank you, Jamie. So as I've been well introduced, I'm a diversity captain at British Triathlon Club. We're based in kind of South London, so Herne Hill, Brixton sort of area. You will have heard our name. There's a real burden of responsibility that comes with being called Windrush. As a club, we're named after Windrush Square in Brixton, which was named after an anniversary to recognise the contribution of the Windrush population to the local area. Obviously, in more recent years, that name has become synonymous with a much wider, much more devastating scandal. And as a club, there has been a lot of soul searching about what that means for us as a club, who are predominantly a white club. We fit the demographic of most triathlon clubs in respect of income income generation, of professional standing, of gender, although we do have a slightly larger group of female participants in the club, which I'll go on to because I think there's probably a reason for that. But in terms of ethnic diversity, we don't represent the local area. So that is our name. And it's something that we've been really careful about. So with respect to my role, as I say, I'm a diversity captain, so it's a co-opted role which sits alongside the committee and supports the club. We've had diversity captains since about 2017, and our role is to make sure that diversity is at the heart of everything we do. Now, because that role has been in existence at the club for now 5 years, it's actually really positively impacted the culture of the club, because what we find, and what I'll go on to talk about, is that most of our initiatives with respect to inclusion and diversity come from our membership. There's a really strong culture of inclusion within the club. We are constantly being challenged by people in the club, entirely appropriately, to change things and make things better for the people who are in our community. And so while it's been helpful to have diversity captains, it's not necessarily the answer for all clubs, and it's certainly not the answer if it ends up being down to that person to make sure that your club is diverse. What has been the real positive in this experience is that we've had incredible coaches who have really pioneered this and really pushed it forward, and we've had a whole committee who are interested and engaged and educate themselves about what they need to do to make this club more representative and more accessible within the community. And ideally we wouldn't have diversity captains. Ideally this would be something that's part of everything that we will do all of the time. And we're getting there. We haven't made ourselves obsolete quite yet, but we are getting there. So I've noticed a point's just coming about names, so I will come back to that at the end. So what we've done, so I've looked a little bit at the history of the club, and I've looked a little bit at what has happened in the evolution of the club and the role over the years. And there's 3 things that we have really progressed through. So the first one is about data. So our very first job was to make sure that our data really truly supported the club. The second one is about reporting and challenging, and the third one is about developing inclusive programs and events. So I'll start off with data. Initially we just had data that said this is a person, they're a man or a woman, and they are in the club. That was it. So there was a lot of discussion about what we should record, and we now take account of ethnicity, age, gender and disability, although all of those are optional. So there's no obligation on anyone to add that data, but we do explain why we collect it, and we find that most people do answer those questions truthfully, which is really helpful. So we do now have a picture of what our membership looks like over a period of time. And that really helps us to see where our gaps are, where we're not as representative, and also where we're doing well. We're a club who has had an incredible string of female coaches, and is predominantly led by women, and that has a really important impact on the amount of women who join the club. So much so we're slightly ahead. We've got slightly more women in the club than men, which is a trend that has remained fairly stable. And what's really helpful with data is that we can make applications for grants and we know exactly what we've got, and we also are able to justify what we're doing and what we're saying on the facts. So I know they're really difficult conversations to have, but it's been so helpful for me to just know that data exists and that I can tap into it and address it whenever we need to. So the second point is about reporting on problems. So we've reported and continue to report on our name as the world changes, as lots of things change in the world. We have really been plagued by a huge amount of white guilt, because what came out of our report was the people who are most uncomfortable about the Windrush name are white people, actually we spoke to people from the Windrush generation, and they said it didn't bother them at all. They weren't upset about the fact that we existed. They weren't especially upset about the fact that we weren't hugely representative. They were much less bothered about it than white people. So that was a really important lesson for us, and it's something, and that's why we haven't changed our name. We absolutely could change our name. There's been loads of options for us. We've put forward lots of different solutions to that, and the outcome has been people actually take pride in this name, in this community. And it's important that what we do is not change our name, but it's important that we work with the community to be representative of them and to support them and to share our resources and our knowledge, rather than to wipe away the problem by changing our name. So we do continue to report on that. At the moment, we're working on a programme that we're calling Be a Better Ally, which has come out of the response that our members had to the Sarah Everard killing in Clapham. Clapham is an area that's very close geographically to where we train, and it's where lots of us train on the common. So it was felt very keenly, particularly by our female athletes and particularly by our female runners, many of whom run at night in the dark on those same streets that Sarah Everard was taken from. So that really cut deep. And as a result, there was a real drive from members to collect stories about verbal sexual harassment that was happening on the streets. And so as a club, we're looking at building better links with the local police force, we're looking at lobbying and political work and things that help other people in the club to be better allies, not just to women when they're out late at night, because it isn't just women and it isn't just when we're out late at night. It's about us being good allies to everyone in the community. And it's about educating people. There's plenty of people within our club, much like you said earlier, who don't see what's around them. So it's for us as a club to continually challenge the status quo. And I feel really proud that we've got an amazing membership who believe in that and who really take that forward. So we're building that at the moment. I'm going to go on to talk about inclusive programs and events, because that's the exciting bit. That's the bit we're doing now. So we started our flagship TriFit program in 2019, and we couldn't do it in 2020 because of the COVID restrictions, and we're just about to relaunch for 2021. It's a 5-week fitness program exclusively for people from ethnic minority communities in the local area, and it incorporates swim, run and S&C. We have been back and forth for years over the points that were made earlier about cycling. It's really tough to provide an entry opportunity for cycling, particularly alongside running and swimming. So it's not impossible, and there's lots of ways of doing it. We have found to kick off this program, it's much easier for us to do swim, run. And also what we do is we run this for 5 weeks, and at the culmination, our participants are all able to enter. They all get a free place into our aquathlon, so it ties up pretty well to do swim and run. So it's run entirely by our female coaches, and it's pretty cheap. It runs essentially at a loss, so participants pay £25 for a 5-week program. And we have got sponsorship from a local organisation. We've also got we've very kindly got funding from BTF and also from English Athletics that helps us run it. But one of the challenges we always have with it is that it's very difficult to strike a balance between it being commercially viable, and so it raises enough money that it runs itself, but also remaining accessible to everyone. And we've been very reluctant to push the price up. So there is an extent to which the reserves of the club pay for that to a point, but we're changing that over the years, because we're able to have more people participating, and we're also, as the program gets better and stronger, it gets a better reputation. So that is hopefully something we're working through. We also, as a club, so TriFit is run separately to the club, but it's facilitated and fun, as I say, partly funded by the club. And the aim when we launched it was simply to run the event. So in that respect, the event met its aim. We were really pleased to have a group of 9 people last time. Several did the aquathlon at the end. We had some amazing feedback from them. 6 of them out of 9 plan to take part in triathlons and running events in the subsequent months, which was incredible because the majority of them had never entered anything, had never been done anything, any race events at all. And all the participants said that they enjoyed it. It was a fun, inclusive program, and quite a few said they didn't want it to end, and they would have happily carried on, which was lovely. It's lovely to get that kind of feedback. Obviously, it is exclusive. We are saying it is exclusively for people who aren't well represented in the club, and you do have to live with that tension and be okay with that. And it's something we talk to the committee about. It's something we ask their direction on. So it was a particular point for our committee. It was something that they wanted to look at, and I think given the demographic of where we are and how we look as a club, that's really important for us. So you and your clubs might have a totally different plan and totally different thing you want to work on, which is absolutely fine. This for us is our biggest priority. So I mean, I think and then there's other things that we're working on with respect to there's Windrush Day each year in June, and we try to make sure we do events for that or fundraising events. This year we're hoping to do a sponsored ride from Tilbury Docks, which is where the boat docked, to Windrush Square in Brixton, with different clubs in the area. We work with other clubs to look at our inclusivity and our diversity, and we, as far as possible, manage and work with our membership so that they can bring ideas to us and we can challenge ourselves and change the way we work all the time, because I think that's what you have to do in order to be genuinely inclusive. So I'd say as takeaways, the things that have been really important for us is to sort your data, know what it is you want to achieve. What is it about your reputation in the community? Is it about your ability to nurture and support different people? Is it about being inclusive? Is it about getting people from a different income bracket to join the club? Is it about not having people join the club at all? Is it about your reputation? And then the last thing I'd say is, if you're sort of sitting there thinking, this is huge, there's loads of things going on here, choose one thing. So look at one thing. It might be link with one other organisation, pass the mic on social media, ask people to educate yourselves or your teams about making events more inclusive, which you're already doing by being here. Might be by running sessions during school hours for parents who don't have childcare options. It might be about making links with local colleges or schools to nurture younger people into the sport. It might be about providing spaces for trans people to swim, or educating your members about why people might have to have different swim hats. And so there's so much out there, there's so much to do. But for us, it's been really valuable to have an inclusive club culture which really supports these things, and an acknowledgement that we're nowhere near there. We're working really hard and there's so much more to do. So I will end there.
Amazing, Sally, that's brilliant. I think I've got a list of questions I definitely want to ask, so I'm sure others will have, but we'll give you a break and go on to the next one, and then we'll come back and do some questions across both afterwards. But amazing insight, some really brilliant advice there around a club that potentially, because of branding, is in a really interesting place at the moment with a lot of this stuff. But it's fab. So we're going to move on. I can see bits coming in, but we'll come back to them after this next bit, just to make sure Sally has a chance to breathe. So we're going to hear from Leeds Girl Can Try. So I know Louise is on, who's going to have a chat through some of the amazing work that that's been happening in that space. So Louise, I'm right in saying Development Officer for Women and Girls at Leeds City Council.
You're right. Sorry, at Leeds City Council.
Well, you introduce yourself so you get it right and I don't mess it up.
No, you've done it right. Okay, so I'm Louise Walker. and I'm the Development Officer for Women and Girls at Leeds City Council. So I lead on the Leeds Girls Can initiative, part of the bigger This Girl Can campaign. I'm also joined by Kirsty Midgley, who is one of the Leeds Girls Can ambassadors. And I suppose what we wanted to just discuss is our journey throughout since the first World Triathlon Series that was held in Leeds, and how we've been able to engage women and girls in that process. And I think we was lucky because at the beginning we had a Go Triathlon activator, Rich, and he used to run a lot of the local Go Tri events. And because we was colleagues, we was able to liaise with each other quite closely and develop and I was able to have an influence on the development and design of some of his community projects. So that enabled me to make suggestions like, have you thought about doing a female only wave? Have you thought about making it slightly shorter? And if when you're paying, can we have a bit of a subsidised, rate for women and girls in the community? And this started to grow the amount of women that was taking part in the local Go Tri events, which was brilliant. I think what is really important is that the Leeds Girls Can brand definitely carries a lot of weight in Leeds. Ever since we've put that, become part of the This Girl Can campaign, I feel that a lot of the stuff that we deliver, so long as we brand it up as this Leeds Girls Can, and we was able to create a pilot project called Go Girls, and was able to have the t-shirts in pink and put it under that same brand. And that is sort of like a drawing thing for us, because women know that if it's a Leeds Girls Can branded product, that is going to be aimed at women that are trying something for the first time or just returning to that activity. There's going to be some form of support there, whether it's from the Leeds Girls Can ambassadors or whether it's from subsidised funding so that we can pay for training, etc. So that has definitely helped us in Leeds. When we moved forward and we then decided we got asked if we wanted to do the pilot, which is the Go Girls, which is the picture that you can see there. That was a great opportunity for some of the women who had been involved in some of our Couch to 5Ks, which Kirsty is going to speak a bit about later. Some of our Couch to Saddle, the cycling product that we had, and also some of the outdoor swimming that Kirsty's done. And it was some of them had a lot of experience in one or two of the disciplines, but by no means did any of them have the experience of all three disciplines of running, swimming and cycling. And the pilot was an opportunity for them to get that one small group training, and that worked really, really well. So we had there was only 8 women that signed up in the end, but them 8 women ranged from 15-year-old to 63. They had sessions of swimming that ran for 6 weeks on a Saturday, where we had triathlon coaches that supported them to develop their stroke and improve their stroke. Then we had some cycling sessions, and it was about the transition period, when you're going from running to swimming, if that's the right way around that, from that. And then there was the swimming as well, the running. And like I said, we've been really good with the Couch to 5K, where we've ran so many delivered by volunteers and Leeds Girls Can ambassadors over the past 5 years, that we have definitely got the stamp on Couch to 5Ks in Leeds. Definitely, we really I think people have confidence in the support that we can give them through their running journey. So that's been a massive link into the Go Tri events and the World Series, Triathlon Series, sorry. But yeah, so I think the good thing is as well, when we're not delivering the Go Tri events, is that we've got the sustainability in all the other areas. So if someone is still wanting to keep running or keep cycling or swimming, there's always something going on under the Leeds Girls Can brand that allows them to keep going at that particular activity. So they don't just do the Go Tri event and then that's the end of it. They're able to keep going with those disciplines throughout the year. Even during lockdown, in the last 12 months, we've kept engaging with those women. We delivered a virtual triathlon series, World Triathlon Series last year, when we wasn't able to do that live. And then we also set up some 1 to 6 sessions. So we had 1 coach to 6 participants, and that was about improving your running and your style of running. And I think that the fact that we've got such a great relationship with Michelle means that we're continuously communicating. Week on week, we communicate on what's coming up, what can we possibly do. And especially during this last year, it's been really vital that we've been able to look at what can we do rather than what we can't do. We've been told about all the things that we can't do, but we've been focusing on, right, can we deliver something where it's just 1 coach and 6 people? Yes, right, well, let's get that done. Can we deliver something where it's just 1 coach and 15 people? Yes, let's get that done. So I think we're continuously ensuring that that engagement with those women in the city is ongoing. Even over Christmas, when we wasn't allowed to do any delivery, we did a 12 days of Christmas, a virtual challenge where the ambassadors, the Leeds Girls Can ambassadors, contribute to videos for people to do on each day leading up to Christmas, and that went down really, really well as well. So I think it's that support that's always, it's that wraparound support. So I don't know if you can get Kirsty up on the camera.
Yeah, I'm here.
And then Kirsty will tell you a bit about some of the different products that we're able to deliver through Kirsty, if that's okay.
Yeah, so yeah, Louise has covered a lot of it. So we do the Couch to 5K, which is huge for us. We usually run 2 a year, and that's our ground point to engage with women in Leeds. The first Couch to 5K, we had over 100 ladies come, and I think it's what we do is make it's non-competitive. It is just every woman can join that, and we make it really simple. It's woman-led. All our coaches, all our run leaders are female, and yeah, so they've been really successful, and it's that was our grounding point to really we've built on that, and that's I think where we've got our foot bearing in Leeds. And then we do women only cycle rides. We're very lucky to have the Brownlee Centre here in Leeds, which is the perfect track to do anything on, but we've got bikes as well. So like Sally was saying, there's that barrier where people don't have access to bikes. We've got the access to bikes that they can use, and at the centre we've run Couch to Saddle, we've done bike maintenance, so that a lot of the barrier for getting out on the road is women that are really scared of what will happen once they're on the road, if they get a puncture, if they get a mechanical. So we've done sessions that are just all about fixing your bike, easy things to do on your bike to get you out on the road, sessions to take you from the track to the road, so just getting used to being in traffic, left turns, right turns, to get you out there, so that so that woman is confident enough to be by herself on the road and carry on training. We've done swim sessions, open water, but we also run with a partner in Leeds swim sessions with female only coaches, female only lifeguards. So it makes it really any barriers that we think and that we know are there, we've taken away those barriers to make it really easy. We've made the cost free or very, very low cost. So we're taking out the cost. We're taking out the barrier of maybe I don't have the right equipment, we'll take that out of it. I can't participate because I can only participate when women are around. We've taken away that barrier as well. So yeah, that all kind of builds up to what we do with Go Try, and what we do in the city, just to make everything really, yeah, just works for us in Leeds.
I don't know if anyone's got any questions on what we've discussed, but I think I'll touch on the swimming. So, for example, with the swimming, we worked with a private, even though we are part of the bigger Leeds City Council provider for, and we provide physical activity for the city. So we've got the 11 leisure centres. They do deliver women only swim sessions. However, they can never guarantee that you're going to get a female coach or female lifeguard. So we worked with a private provider called Sink or Swim, and he was happy to, you know, we use a private venue, so it's one of the, I think we've got the grammar school and we've got a school that has a pool in it, and we was able to deliver, as Kirsty has mentioned, sessions where we could guarantee that the lifeguard would be female. We had 2 lanes. One lane was for people who couldn't swim at all, and the women coaches would get in the water with the women, and we had a lane that was just about improving your stroke. And those sessions were like 60% South Asian women attended those sessions, and of those South Asian women and other women, most of them was over the age of 30. So we definitely captured an age and demographic of diversity that we wasn't getting in the leisure centres at all. And it's a proven way of working, but it's just that I think when we spoke about the I think the Windrush group and the disability discussion that we had, it's around people being willing to take the risk and not thinking so much about what income generation we're going to get, and more about how can, because people say that some groups are hard to reach. So a lot of the discussions that we had within the leisure centres around swimming, I've worked within this department for 20 odd years, and I've had the discussion around South Asian women. They want to swim, that's not been the issue. They just don't want, they want someone to guarantee them that if they're coming to a swimming pool, that a man isn't going to walk in when they're in their swimming costume, for example. And if we can't guarantee that, then that's where we're missing out on those customers. And that's what we've made through Leeds Girls Can. We've provided an environment where those women feel safe and know that they're going to come there and it's going to be female led. Everything about the session is females, and they're paying a lot more for those sessions than they ever would be paying in a general leisure centre environment. So it's not about the money. When people say, you know, these hard to reach groups, they haven't got enough money. There is cases where they haven't got enough money, don't get me wrong, but in some cases it's not about the money, it's not about how far they have to travel, it's simply about the wraparound support and the environment that they're doing their activity in. And that's just one example of some of the work that we focus on and make fit for women in Leeds. So
yeah, amazing. So much stuff within that to try and unpick. And again, I've got questions set if we don't get any in, but I'm pretty sure we will do.
Yeah.
Thanks so much again. I just wanted to go back because I saw some bits came in when Sally was talking, just to go back to those and see if there's any of those to pick up.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have Paul from Hilsey Lido in Portsmouth, where their club voted to drop the name Crusaders from the title, partly because of negative comments and an issue about identity, which is such an important conversation to have. You need to be able to own the brand that you've got, and if you don't align with it and it doesn't align with what you stand for, then absolutely change it. And that's a really brave decision. And some comments about data. Becky, who is our head coach at Windrush, was saying having the support and the focus of a diversity team makes her role as head coach more achievable in trying to be inclusive. It means that she and other people in the team can bring things to us to say, we've been thinking about this, or we're looking at doing something new. And are able to touch base with us and bounce ideas so that we can make sure that we're as accessible as we can be when we're looking at new things and different things. Another note from Paul, great example to adopt in some form. We'll rewatch the session to pick up the points. Yes, and then Audrey, who also works with us, will tap into the work that we do. And I know that she's been brilliantly supportive of the work that we've done previously. So yeah, were there any other questions?
I mean, Sally, I wanted to ask you about like, how did the champion role initially come about? Like, who drove that? Where was the ambition for that to come from?
So my understanding is that it came from, so the captain role came from, I think, a drive from our head coach at the time, who was, she, in her words, banging the drum for equality and representation, and that then, as I understand it, dovetailed into having this role for someone to take on a diversity project, is how it started, to sort of look at inclusion in the round, and we've now got inclusion, we've got disability inclusion captains, and we've got diversity captains, so we work together on a lot of different stuff. So I think it came from a drive from the committee to do more. And then this idea of having a project ended up with having the captain role.
Brilliant. I think that's really useful, because somebody definitely made the point earlier on about, like, where do you get more people to do more stuff? It's hard. Where does that come from? Yeah, definitely. Louise Kersey, I really wanted to ask about where did the ladies come from that you recruited? How did you go about that? What can people learn from how you got people involved?
I'll go first. Sorry.
You want to go, Lou?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, the first email went out to the Leeds Girls Can ambassadors, because we've got like 12, 13 Leeds Girls Can ambassadors of all different ages and abilities, and we felt that it would be a great opportunity for them to pilot and push themselves out of their comfort zone with new disciplines. And then once we got feedback over who wanted to be involved from that group, we opened it up slightly wider. But do you want to add some more, Kirsty?
So I was just going to say, from obviously social media is big for us. So our Couch to 5Ks are purely led by social media to get the women in. And once we've engaged with them once, we find that those women really do stay around. I think the big thing that we're not is a club, and we hear this time and time again that they're too scared to join a club. They're at that point where they're not ready to join a club. So they really are the grassroots ladies of any program that we run. So once we've engaged with them, we've got them. We kind of do hold them there. Then we've got closed Facebook groups for both our Tri and our Run groups. Which, yeah, some of them have evolved into big Run groups now, but certainly when we start there, social media is the first place, and word of mouth, it kind of built from that first session. But yeah, and we've got a great team of ambassadors. We've got kind of 10-12 ambassadors from all different backgrounds that then push out into their communities as well. Amazing.
Brilliant, thank you. I can't see the chat that's coming in because I'm sharing my screen, but if there's stuff that's coming in that you guys want to pick up, then please jump in.
So we've just had a comment through about indoor tri, and has that been explored by some clubs? We'll put a reply to it as well. But it was just really a question of maybe it could be adapted for clubs to live within local leisure centres. From a triathlon point of view, I know it's something that was explored within the Go Tri product, but I would say it probably hasn't been pushed as much as it probably could be in that. So it is certainly something we can support with, and there is a tool out there that can be used.
I think if I can jump in, Lizzie, on that, I think there's opportunities. Not everybody on the call will know that we're looking at what's termed a place-based approach to working in some parts of the country to try and expand the number of communities who are able to enjoy swim, bike, run, not necessarily triathlon per se, but swim, bike, run. And I think those kind of ideas are some of the things we might see come out of that there are ways and facilities that enable groups to engage within the sport in some way. And as I've said in that answer there, I think there's ways that it can be readily adapted to meet the needs of various people across all of our communities. So yeah, really good idea, and I think it's something we can follow up. And Alison, if you have a very clear idea on how it works, email clubs@britishtriathlon.org and we'll pick it up with you, and we'll give you the credit. We'll pinch it and roll it out ours, but we'll give you credit for it.
Thanks, Will. Sally, I wanted to come back to another point you mentioned about how this feels like it's something that is really embedded within the club, and that you're constantly being challenged by members. And just wanted to see if you had any examples around the kind of stuff that people are challenging against, or kind of like pushing for.
Yeah, so I think there was a really big push for us to respond as a club, both to Black Lives Matter and also to the Sarah Everard death. So there was we were contacted quite professionally by members of the club who said, we want our club to be talking about this, and we also picked up from a welfare point of view on the extent to which some women in the club are really worried about going out. And certainly after the Sarah Everard death, it was really difficult as a woman who runs at night to think that that was an okay thing to do. And so that we really worked, we're pretty in tune with our members, and we worked really hard with them we sort of sat down and said, what is it that would make us feel more comfortable now? What is it that we need to do? And we asked people, and we had separate WhatsApp groups, and we said, you know, if people are affected by this, if people want to talk about this, this is how you do it. And so I think a lot of it's come from that. But we have WhatsApp groups that are those kind of groups that make you feel popular all the time, because someone's always talking about swimming, cycling, running. So they're in pretty constant use, but there will sometimes be messages in there that aren't quite right or aren't quite within the culture of the club. And what I'm always really impressed by is the extent to which our members, not just the people on the committee and the captains, but people in the club will say, actually, think about how that has come across, or did you mean to say it like this? And not in a way that is rude or confrontational. And sometimes we'll take it offline and say, actually, I'm going to send you some message with some data about that, because I think that that's not quite right. And so I'm always really impressed with how they respond to things like that. And so that's what I mean about challenging each other and challenging our views and challenging our education or lack thereof in respect to certain things. So I think it is ongoing, and because we continue to have those conversations, it's the sort of thing that keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how this area, like, it can be so massive, and I really liked what you said about, if nothing else, just do one thing. I think that's a really great point. But the other side of it is this stuff is so transitional in that you never know what's going to happen next. Like with Black Lives Matter, like with Sarah Everard, like there's always going to be a something that we need to be kind of thinking about and kind of bringing this stuff back down to what's happening. Yeah, that's brilliant. Kirsty, Louise, I wanted to ask about the points you just made. That we hear quite a lot about not wanting to be part of a club and not wanting to be in a competitive environment and keeping things quite social. So then how can the clubs learn either how they can help with it, with maybe the transition for some people who do want to move on to that after they've got a bit of confidence, or how they can do more of that social, more kind of relaxed stuff?
Do you want to answer? So I think the number one thing from the This Girl Can campaign in totality is that fear of judgment, and it's those ladies that are certainly a lot of the cycling ladies are not confident. They can't change gears, they can't take their hand off they wobble, they can't look behind them, they can't indicate. So those ladies are not ready to join a club. They think that a club is going to be too advanced for them, so they're just not ready. The running ladies, the same thing. They can't run 5k. Some of them don't have the right shoes, they don't have the right clothes, they don't have the right sports bras. There's just a general, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't possibly join a club. But the This Girl Can campaign has done it so well over the years, something that we've really just ridden on the coattails of how well they've created that campaign, is that we've taken away that fear of judgment. We're all the same. We don't rock up there in our best kit after running half a marathon. We're all the same. There are days when I can not do 5k, and it's that fear of, like, it's that relating to somebody else. And I think there's that fear that a club is going to be too good for them. Even if those clubs are running couch to 5k sessions already, they come to us saying, I'm not ready to join a club, but they will. We certainly push them from the end of that couch to 5k, push them on to joining clubs. So we invite clubs in to say, come and talk to the girls about what we're doing, about what your club is doing, where we can take them further on from that, but there's certainly that huge fear of, I mean, certainly a lot of the women that we do Couch to 5K would never even think about starting a triathlon, but once they can run 5K, we say, right, come to a bike session, and then they do a bike session, oh, come to a swim session, and then suddenly they're doing a triathlon, and it's just the next step for them. So it's that gradual, and yeah, they do join clubs, but certainly when we first get them, they're not ready. Many are not ready. Some are.
But yeah, but do you think if a club went and put the effort in to kind of break down a lot of that kind of stuff? I mean, Sally's talked about the session you're doing with around the Go Try stuff. So there obviously is examples of clubs doing some of this more social kind of outreachy stuff. Yeah.
We've got a very tight link with Run Leeds. So one of our colleagues is the project manager for Run Leeds. So we've got when it comes to running, we've got a direct link into running clubs, and we make sure that a lot of the work we do can signpost to such clubs. But we also encourage, because the work we're doing is definitely about influencing community work. So we may run a Couch to 5K in a park for like a year, 2 years, but off the back of that, we leave it with a social running group. So although it might not be a club as such, it is a club to them, because you know, they can then go on to become constituted, they can go on to become a club. So we're creating new clubs that are tailored to them type of women. And when I then say them type of women that want something that's on their doorstep, they want to run within particular parks, they want to run with a particular type of woman, female only. So I guess like Kirsty says, we're working with people who have never ever thought that they fit the club profile as such, and that might take years for them to feel that, and it might take more experience and more, you know, going from Couch to 5K to doing the Race for Life to then doing the Leeds 10K, and as they progress through that and meet new people, then that will then make them feel part of the running world or the running club. And the same for all the other disciplines, I'd say, because I think when you're coming from we're working with the most deprived people in the city, so when you're coming from that point, you're looking at clubs as this affluent, prestigious place to be. You know, they're, like Kirsty says, they're places where everyone's got the right kit and the right trainers and, you know, the right watches to time what the last run was, etc. We're going from a very basic, stripped back version of all those things.
I think for clubs, a lot of our run sessions and some of our cycle sessions are led by, we have leaders from, we work quite closely with Run Leeds, leaders from the clubs will come in. So once they get to know them, so I don't know what it's like in other cities, obviously we quite, but in Leeds, there's a lot of that working together. So the clubs come in and work with us so that we can feed into their sessions as well.
Brilliant. But I think this is something where whether clubs want to try and set some of these things up themselves, or whether they can reach out and try and find some other partners in the community, like this can definitely be done. There's partnerships all over the place, whether that's through faith centres or other kind of community groups that exist, or the local council. There will be people who know about some of that outreach stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've done work with so for example, we have Front Runners, which is an LGBT running group in round here, and when we've done the Couch to 5Ks, we've actually delivered specifically for, you know, the LGBT community as well, where we had women that wanted to then feed into that running group, Front Runners, but wanted to start a Couch to 5K independently first, and then filtering and signposting to that group once they got to a level that they felt they could keep up with them. So I know someone's put in the comments that the language, and it's not us, and I don't see it as an us and a them. What I'm trying to say is the same way that some things can be perceived by people who are not in that club, people who have not ran before, cycled or swam, their perception is that the people in clubs are not necessarily athletes, but of a better quality runner than they are, and that's just their perception. I get that, but we're there to remove those perceptions and there to build their confidence up so they feel they can then go into those environments. Many years ago, I worked on a project that was about running It was a couch to 5K, and it was about complete beginner running, and we did a lot of work around with Run Athletics England, around us setting up couch to 5Ks at running clubs, and instead of them starting at the same, everyone starting at being able to run 5K, they set up new groups below that level that they supported to get to that level, if that makes sense. So there was like an extra group added, a complete beginner group added to the running clubs, so that people could just come in at that level.
I think, and that's something I think that is relevant for all sport, around that a lot of kind of mainstream participation at the moment revolves around, right, just jump in and let's go. And also there's not really much space to kind of play outside of competition. So a lot of that, I think we're seeing a lot more of that social side of things around, like a lot of the back to programs, or things like walking football or walking hockey, and those kind of things that are about let's go real back to basics and do some of that intro stuff and just try and offer something a bit different. But I just wanted to come back to that point about perception, in that like this whole space is all based on false perceptions from everyone all around the table, in that people either are kind of falsely presuming stuff or are not just thinking about stuff in a wider sense. And that really comes back to the point about trying to make sure that you've got diversity around the table to ensure that there's diversity of thought in decision making or in planning, to try and make sure that it's not the same people in the same environment kind of pushing out the same programs, because nothing changes. I can see some bits have come in. Lizzie, is there anything to pick up on?
So Paul's just said that this is 2 great examples of ambassadors for being inclusive. So thank you very much for the information and for ideas to pop up, to follow up on. I think we've already commented on Audrey's post. She had also asked earlier specifically about, it's sort of linked to the questions that you'd already asked, but why are they scared to join the clubs? That question was aimed towards Kirsty. And I think the other questions have all been covered. Oh, and Alison's just popped in to say, talking about false perceptions, one I come across a lot with club coaches is that slow equals beginner. Older people may be experienced, but not fast.
Yeah, a really good point, definitely. I just wanted to, with the time we've got left, try and kind of open things up generally. If there's anything anybody kind of wants to contribute, question, ask, we've got a bit of time to go right back across kind of everything we cover, which has been a huge amount.
To say, feel free to unmute and ask the questions directly.
Yeah.
You've got to type it in the box.
Whilst kind of people are thinking, there's just a couple of the points I wanted to come back to that you guys have made around, I think it was Louise who said around focusing on what we can do rather than what we can't. I think is just such a brilliant way of thinking about a lot of this kind of stuff. Let's take the negatives out of this and stop thinking about, well, they obviously can't do that or this or that. Let's look at what people can do. And Sally, what you said about being brave around the commitment to do specific things, and that you can back that up with the data that you guys have got, and whether you feel like you even need to do that or not. If this is an initiative that the club wants to do and it's backed by members, you don't need to justify that. That's where you want to go with stuff. I think there was some brilliant stuff in there. I'm going to pause and extend this awkward silence just because sometimes it leads to some contribution.
We've just got another comment that says, one really simple thing for coaches is to organise sessions by time rather than distance. This helps alter for mixed abilities. I think that is really key. I always find clubs always set an hour times, because you've got an hour time slot in the pool, and that pool time is so precious usually to book, that people swim for an hour well, actually a benefit of a session to somebody who is perhaps a beginner might be 20 minutes and that's their time done, but that for them to have a really great experience within 20 minutes and feel like they're achieving something rather than them working themselves until they can no longer swim and then they feel like they're drowning and that experience has changed, can totally change things. So I
felt a bit like that this morning when I went for a swim and I was on my own.
Jamie, could I add something about This Girl Can as well?
Yeah, please do.
There's an opportunity for every club to get involved with This Girl Can and run a session that is a This Girl Can session. So it's obviously a Sport England funded project. So you just go to them and discuss or let them know about the project that you're running, and you can label that a This Girl Can run. So you may just take a step back from your club and just make it a This Girl Can session, and that certainly for us has been a whole lot more inclusive.
Amazing. I did used to work at Sport England, so I should probably say something like thanks for the plug. It is an amazing program and it's done so much for women's participation, yeah, it's brilliant. I guess I just wanted to kind of come back. Sorry, I've got a whiny puppy that you might be able to hear. We're almost there. He's done so well. I just wanted to come back to a couple of those points earlier on around just try and take this opportunity to just go back and have a look at what your clubs are delivering. If there's ways that you can bring in different people to current setup around just trying to get some of that diversity of thought around the table, that's brilliant. Or at least go back and have a look at what you think your club responsibilities are. Where do you kind of want to go with this stuff? Where is this sitting in your club ethos? That is brilliant stuff to go back and just kind of reflect on. I can see Will's put his hand up, so definitely jump in there, Will.
Yeah, I think just an appeal from me that clubs don't sit silently. Whether you don't think you're doing enough, you think you haven't got the support there, reach out to us. And if we don't have the answers, we'll talk to people like Jamie and to Sally and to Kirsty and Louise and try and find some of the answers for you. On the flip side, don't think that what you're doing isn't great and we want to know about it. Come and tell us. And the only way we learn across the whole of the sport is to share the ideas. So whatever you're doing, how small it is, please reach out to us. Please talk to your regional managers and we can start to share that. We're shortly going to start reviewing some of our club support, whole package across the whole of the sport. And clearly this is a key central pillar to that. And I'd also be interested, you will get surveys that come out at the back end of the conference to capture your thoughts, but I'd be interested in people's thoughts, not necessarily now, but about how we do more and how we set up more of these sessions. I found today fascinating just to sit and listen, but how we as a sport can do more to help clubs. What's the best mechanism for that? Yeah, this is quite a long and in-depth session. It engages a certain number of people in a certain way, but are there other ways, and is this the right way of doing it? It's not necessarily a question to be answered now, but I'd appreciate people's thoughts over time. And that survey at the end of the conference might be one way. Otherwise, we've got your regional managers and our clubs@britishtriathlon.org email address, which would be a starting point if you have ideas.
Thanks, Will. Louise, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one really. It's just to say that also what we found has been really beneficial to link in with running clubs specifically is when we are delivering our Couch to 5Ks, sometimes there's been weeks when our run leaders are not available, and we've been able to post out to local running clubs and say if they've got any leaders who would be happy to cover for one session, they're welcome to come down. And that's been good because that's given them an opportunity to get involved in something different to their usual club nights, and get to meet some of the runners and vice versa. So that's been useful as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Louise. I think there's hopefully plenty of food for thought there, and we're certainly moving in the right direction with this. And as we said right at the start, the fact that people are here and at least 19 of you have stuck it all the way out to the end is brilliant. Hopefully more people will watch this back when it goes out, when the record is released as well. But I think, shall I just hand back to Michelle? Are you going to close, or Lizzie? I bring up the last bits.
Yeah, I don't mind either of us. Just a huge thank you to everybody who's come along tonight. The contribution has been fantastic. It's always great to hear what everybody's doing, and I think it's just really important that the more that we actually share and get out there and share the experiences of everybody who's doing something that's slightly different, or who are trying something new, the more we share that, the more other clubs can try things and learn from everybody else's experiences. So yeah, please do get in touch with your regional managers. Obviously myself and Lizzie are on here tonight. If you don't know who they are, then please feel free just to contact us and we'll point you in the right direction. But yeah, if anybody's got any questions obviously afterwards as well, then I can hang around for the last 5 minutes if you want to speak to us as well. But yeah, just a huge thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it.